Good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us. Welcome to this session of Megaport Live. My name is Mike, and I will be walking you through an overview of Megaport, and we're going to do a little bit of whiteboarding. We're going to talk about some customer scenarios. I'm going to touch a bit on product and show you some portal and one specifically a product called Megaport Virtual Edge, and we'll wrap it up in about 30 minutes. Feel free to ask any questions along the way, and with that, we'll keep going. So Megaport is an Australian company. We've been around about 10 years, and we are public. The ticker symbol is MP1. And we have found an increasing demand for cloud connectivity. About 77% of our connections terminate to the cloud, primarily AWS, Azure, and Google. And we also connect to all the other major players as well. And 43% of our customers connect to more than one provider. And we even have a specific product called Megaport Cloud Router to address that I'll touch on here in a little bit. We focus our account teams in sales groups consisting of a sales executive, a solutions architect, which is what I do, and a customer success manager, and we call that a pod. If we look at the Megaport products, you're probably familiar with some or many of, or all of these, but I want to touch briefly on these and we'll walk through in a little more detail. A port is our base offering from the access side of things. So this would be a connection from a data center or a last mile circuit through a meet me room and a cross connect provided by that data center operator that connects you to a Megaport router under the hood. It's an Ethernet over fiber, and it's a connection, hard connection to us. And then once you have that, though, you have a gateway to cloud providers, to other Megaport data centers, to our marketplace, which is on the right-hand side. And it is, like I said, a core part of our offering. The beauty of it is that you can provision services with, pardon me, a VXC, or what's in the center of the screen, or a Megaport Virtual Cross Connect, which is a layer 2 VLAN. So the ability to spin those connections up literally can be done in minutes and are scalable depending on the cloud provider, or if you're connecting between Megaport data centers, those are very elastic and can be scaled as necessary. The Megaport Cloud Router is what I was alluding to just a moment ago, gives you the ability to connect between clouds. It is a BGP peer. So for example, I could connect to IBM through the Megaport Cloud Router and maybe transfer workloads to AWS or vice versa. So we see that in a couple of different scenarios, what we'll touch on. And the Megaport Virtual Edge, I'm actually going to walk through how to build that out. Megaport Virtual Edge and MCR actually live on compute. And we have several compute regions across the country. Think of NFL cities like Denver and Dallas and Atlanta and et cetera, and Chicago. And we have compute locations where the MCR lives and where the MVE compute lives. And with MVE, you actually bring a license of a vendor. And we'll touch more on that as well, like a firewall, a router, or a SD-WAN. Megaport also has an extensive marketplace of customers that offer services like Wasabi, like Cloudflare, like RingCentral, where they are Megaport customers, and if you're a Megaport customer, you can actually build a connection to them via service key, and it's a really neat way to build your network, low latency across our backbone, and tie networks together. If you're aware of any customers or partners that you work with that also have Megaport, you can connect to them directly as well using a service key, which, an encryption key. We offer internet through many of our POPs, and that there are dual providers in every one of those locations. And then we also offer Mega IX, which is our internet exchange worldwide. So this is what I was referring to with the hybrid cloud, is that ability to get a connection to a port, an external network, and it could be a cage in a data center, or it could be a last mile type of circuit. And I think this illustrates it even better, where you have a meet me room from a carrier, maybe at a premises location, then you get a last mile type of fiber, maybe from a Lumen, Zayo, or a Crown Castle, or Xfinity, or whatever, and then you interconnect to a carrier meet me room. And when you spin up this port in a Megaport enabled data center, which I can show you, you actually download an LOA and you hand it to the data center provider for this portion here, and it's done within minutes. It really is pretty fascinating for people who have a carrier background like I do to see that process happen in minutes. when it's something that historically has taken far longer. And then this is this VXC I was just referring to connecting to the cloud, which is a layer 2 VLAN. And this is over the Megaport backbone. And the beauty of this is that it's predictable latency. We publish latency between every one of our POPs on a monthly basis. So you know exactly how long it takes to get from Denver to Chicago or LA to Tokyo or any one of our over 900 data center points of presence. So cross cloud, this is the compute I was leveraging and speaking to just a moment ago. These are the POPs where, if you see where I've sorted this on the left-hand side, this is a screenshot of one of our portal sites for locations, MCR and MVE. And what I'm giving you a sense of here is where the compute locations are located. They are redundant. So when I show 3 sites in Denver, there's 3 locations that each have dual chassis, what we call red and blue, independent of each other to host an MCR or an MVE. They're independent. Uh, the MCR lives on 6WIND. The MVE lives on Cisco 8KB or an 8000 series router. And then, of course, you bring your license. The MCR is something that we own and maintain. You don't need to bring a license for it. So again, I'm choosing Denver, which is where I'm located. So you can see our 3 locations. Within each of those 3 locations is compute in that dual stack that I was referring to. So the idea behind Megaport Cloud Router is I can traverse workloads between clouds, but I don't have to go all the way back to my data center port or my on-prem router. So if I need to migrate between workloads, this is a very, very effective way to do it through these VXCs. We see this also sometimes in acquisitions, where a company acquires a company that maybe they have Oracle, and the company that makes the acquisition has AWS, and they need to migrate that. And you can stand up the MCR just for that purpose. And we also see it in applications where people are using more than one cloud and need to share it between each one. Virtual POP is that Megaport Virtual Edge that I was just referring to. So I can use my Megaport Virtual Edge as a cloud router, just like what I was showing you, but I can use an SD-WAN router or firewall stack to provision a license on our compute. And I'll show you what this looks like in Palo here in just a little bit. But the beauty of this is that I do not need a last mile connection to secure an access point on the Megaport network. So I can use internet or SD-WAN, IPsec, to get to the Megaport Virtual Edge. And so my branch offices or remote sites have a way to get to my compute, again, without a last mile connection. So I'll show you the vendors that we work with, but the Palo, Cisco, VMware, Meraki's coming. So a whole slew that we work with. And here we go. So these are the vendors that we leverage. We do not provide the license. You have to secure that, but when you do, you can install it on our compute. Incidentally, really quick, let me go back one point. We do have customers that have, let's say, VMware SD-WAN, but they also leverage Palo Alto Firewall. So they actually run dual MVEs from a security stack and an SD-WAN stack. So that is a common deployment. We actually have a customer that is in the healthcare industry that connects clinics through Megaport using Megaport Virtual Edge. Their plan right now is to reduce their physical data center footprint by doing more in the cloud, reducing that cage footprint. And what they're able to do is actually connect to Epic, connect to Azure, and with their clinic sites, and then they can connect to WebEx, to Five9, et cetera, all through the Megaport Virtual Edge and our layer 2 circuits. And it's really elegant. We can talk to you more about that case study, but just know that it's not either or. And I can always tie these back to physical ports too. So I can maintain my physical ports. I could tie it to an MCR. All of these things are interchangeable. All right. Now the MVE comes in a few different sizes, from 2-core or CPU up to 12-core. We will be rolling out 16-core this year, early this year. And you can go from 8 gig of RAM up to 48 gig of RAM. On the right side, you're noticing that we have transit VXC or internet. So in order to manage a device, you can provision 20 meg of internet from the MVE, up to 10 gig also for those branch locations to talk to the Megaport Virtual Edge. This is an example of a customer with a port or that first access mechanism in the Scott data center in Nebraska. They also have MVE locations in Chicago, Then they also have a port down in Dallas, as well as MVE locations in the Texas area. And then also on the West Coast, they have MVE locations, and you can see they use Azure and AWS for their cloud. But the beauty of this is I can regionalize my Midwest or Central traffic, my Southwest or Texas traffic, and my West Coast traffic, and I can give access for branch offices to talk to these locations, and then use the Megaport backbone as my interconnect. And so this is all predictable latency, as I was referring to, between these sites. So really, really cool. So the last one is global WAN as a service, and we're seeing a lot of traction from customers who have MPLS networks that are national or global in scale, and they're trying to interconnect their workloads together. And so what this diagram is trying to illustrate is that you can use Megaport Cloud Router, you can use ports, you can use MVEs in different regions and interconnect them together over our backbone. And I'm going to show you a diagram here in a little bit of a very specific use case that talks about that. But the beauty of it is I can reduce my MPLS spend and I can isolate on one provider and really streamline efficiency. And one more time, these backbone links are very, very predictable. And I'm not having to procure global MPLS and manage it. All of it's done through a portal, which we'll talk to here in just a bit. So this actually is that customer example that I wanted to illustrate. This is a customer with offices in Denver and Virginia, and also Canada and London. And what they did was so let me back up. They had disparate MPLS providers from Lumen and Zayo. And what they decided to do was concentrate their spend on getting access to the Megaport network in all of these locations. In one case, they have a cage presence in Denver, but they have dual ports or red and blue zone ports, which we segregate those for maintenance purposes. And they interconnected all of these sites together over our backbone, over VXCs, which I've been alluding to. And they interconnect them in a fully meshed fashion, fully redundant fashion, and concentrate again their MPLS spend. They diverted, I should say, on getting access circuits to our network. So they satisfy their contractual obligations and spend with the carrier, but they're able to migrate to something that's streamlined it in a much, much easier way to manage. So this is an actual live customer, name redacted to protect the innocent, but it's beautiful because they interconnect not only their private networks, but they have redundant services to the cloud as well in all of their workload regions around the country and the world. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up that with that portion of the slideshow, and I want to just touch a little bit on some diagrams that go over some concepts that we've already talked about. This is the port or the basic access. This is showing a Denver network with dual last mile connections from a provider like a Zayo or a Lumen, connecting to CoreSite in Denver, which is 910 15th Street downtown. And they're connected to dual 10 gig Megaport ports. We offer 10 and 100 gig ports, and mostly 10 and 100 since 1 and 10s are the same price. We're largely deprecating those. But in this configuration, what the customer has done is taken their Azure Express route and split it over two VXCs, two diverse Azure routers to satisfy a Microsoft SLA. And this gives them redundancy. And if we ever do a maintenance, we're only going to take down one router at a time. If we do that every year or two periodically to update firmware, et cetera. But if I have a dual config, then I am not susceptible to an outage, and I keep my services up and running. So this is a very, very common deployment on Megaport. Now, this shows the same type of scenario over multiple locations using that Megaport cloud router. So I'm redundant in my cloud routing, I'm redundant in ports, and I'm in London, I'm also in DC, and I can traverse workloads through my Megaport cloud router over redundant VXCs. Also a very common configuration where I've got the ability to move between my European and my US workloads without having to hairpin all the way back to a router off my data center or my customer prem. So another common deployment scenario. MVE, to kind of elaborate on what we've already talked about, similar to the diagram I showed you, but these are branch locations that are going to use IPsec tunnels to get to the internet. And then with the Megaport Virtual Edge, we're going to sell you internet access that gives that the ability to talk to your Megaport Virtual Edge. So the flow of traffic is each way from the internet from the branch site to the MVE and vice versa, and it gives you the ability to hub and spoke that network, like I showed you on that previous slide. And then lastly, of course, is the diagram I was just showing you in the presentation of the global WAN. All right. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and look at the Megaport portal. And I want to pause. Are there any questions that I need to address before we keep moving? Okay. So with that in mind, this is the Megaport portal, and this is where I can stand up services in every one of our enabled data centers. And whether I deploy it in the US or Tokyo or London, the look and feel of it's exactly the same. And if I create a port, I come in and let's just choose Denver and that core site location I was just talking about. And I can choose a port speed. And like I said, we can offer up to 100 gig in many of our locations. And I'm just going to choose the 10 gig. And uh, the pricing is 600 on month to month down to 450 on a 3-year term. And I can create a diverse pair in this location. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And what I'm going to do is create a red and blue port, which you saw in the diagrams. And I'm going to call this test 2 and go ahead and enable that and add port. And that's going to put it in my shopping cart here on the left-hand side. Now, the Megaport Cloud Router, again, looking at our locations, are located around in NFL cities. So I'm going to sort my compute, and you can see around the country where they're located. And if I jump back into my Denver map, right, you can see we have it at a few different places. So depending on the location, I can have up to 12 cores of service. So I can come into here and click on Create MCR. And just to mix it up a little bit, let's just go with Chicago to just show that I can get to another city very easily. So we'll just do Chicago. We'll go to red, choose a red zone, and I'm going to select a 10 gig MCR, which, by the way, we just recently rolled out larger sizes than 10 gig. So we have 1 gig, 10 up to 10 gig, and then we just recently rolled out in several locations 25, 50, and 100 gig MCRs. So think of Denver, Dallas, Chicago, Ashburn, etc., with more and more countries coming online, or locations coming online, I should say. Okay. And here's the price on a 10 gig, 1,200 on month to month, 900 on a term, and go ahead and enable that. And that is my MCR. And then lastly, I want to spend just a minute talking about MVE, which again is that Megaport Virtual Edge. And I want to deploy Megaport Virtual Edge in Chicago as well, just to show you that we can. And it'll take a moment to deploy it, and I'll go back to one that I've already created just to walk through all of it because it takes a while for the processing to get set up. But create my Megaport Virtual Edge. And these are the vendors that we support. So we've got Six Wind, Aruba, Aviatrix, Cisco. We just recently rolled out Cisco FTD. Fortinet, Meraki's coming soon. Private beta is going to be available here fairly quickly. You can see we've got Palo, SD-WAN, as well as Firewall, VMware, and Versa as well. So a good variety of vendors. And I'm going to go ahead and just grab this Palo version here. And what I need to do to build this out is give it a quick name here. And you can see that I've got 2 core all the way up to 12 core. I'm going to choose the 12 just for demo purposes. And I'm going to add a admin password that will allow me to access the device. And then what I want to do is grab an SSH key and pull it in here. So let me do that really quick. Put that in. So bear with me just one moment while I do that. I'm going to drop my SSH key in here. And we also have sub interfaces or virtual NICs, VNICs that we can assign, and you can do up to 5. So let's say I wanted to create an HA pair. I'm going to create maybe one back to my premises location, and then just one additional VNIC just in case I need to get to it And I'm just going to call this additional. Now, we reserve one for management to get to the device. We also can terminate all of the VXCs to cloud on the data plane. So it can support up to 25. So, I don't have to map those to each one of those VNICs. And we'll just go ahead and put this in here and add the MVE. Now, this is the part where I add the management I was referring to just a little bit ago. So there's internet that I want to use on the management plane that I'm going to map to. And I'm going to grab that internet in Chicago, and we have multiple locations where we provide internet. And we're just going to do the smallest VXC I can provision, which is 20, and that's going to go on my management plane. And then I'm going to order the internet that is for the branch offices to connect to. I'm going to come in here and grab internet, and I'm going to do it out of Chicago again. And I'm going to go ahead and do a full 10 gig of internet, and I'm going to map that to the data plane, which is again how the devices talk to it that are at my branch locations, and add my VXC. So once I order all of those services, they will process, okay? And if you look in here, let's find a port that's already been established, okay? Once that port is created, I actually have the ability to download an LOA almost immediately, which I was referring to very easily, and then hand that to my data center provider. Now, to get to the MVE from a management interface. So I have Palo. So if I want to access it via PAN, the orchestrator, what I do is find the IP address that is for the Megaport internet that is assigned to the management interface, which is this guy here. So I come in here and I click on details and I grab this IP right here. And when I do that, I can paste it in. And let's just walk through that really quick. It may take a moment, but that's okay. And I'm already in PAN, but what I'm trying to show you is that once I go to the box, it's going to take me to PAN, and then I can log in using my admin password, which will pop up here in just a minute. Okay, and boom, I'm in. So that's the beauty of it. So I'm going to manage all of my endpoints in Palo in PAN, but then I'm also going to be able to manage my access to this MVE in the portal. And this is one that I built earlier just out of Denver, just for demonstration purposes. So if I need to connect to the cloud, as an example, I can come in here and I could build, for example, a hosted connection to the cloud, to AWS, grab my host to connect, and I could choose the location where I want to onboard based on where my workload region is. So out of Denver, do I want to go to Ohio to get to East 2? Do I want to go to California to get to West 1? Let's just choose that. And then I build my VXC, which can be up to 10 gig, and I can assign it to my data plane, and I can put that in, and then I can add my host to connect. Okay. Paste in my AWS account ID, and away I go. Okay. So same thing with Azure. I have to have my express route service key created, but if I do, I can come in and add the connection to Azure. Same thing, go to cloud, find my Azure tile, drop in my service key, and I can provision my express route like what I was showing you in the diagram. So all of these services can be spun up very easily. We're more than happy to help walk you through that if you're ready. And I want to pause there again. If there's any questions that are in chat, I want to address those before we wrap up. All right. With that, I'm going to let you go and continue your Friday morning or afternoon. And I hope you have an awesome weekend. And thanks so much for joining.